So this is a modular approach to building multiple websites. That's the fancy title for this. What it really is the story about how me and my friends and colleagues at the Minnesota Historical Society went about rebuilding our historic location websites. We have 26 historic locations, and it was a ride full of adventure and some drama, and so these are the ups and downs of that particular transformation. A little bit about myself. My name is Malik Davis. I am the senior designer developer at the Historical Society. I work with a team of 3 designer developers, 2 developers, and we have 1 department head. I've been working there for about 5 years, which makes me the most junior member of my department because folks there stay there a long time. And a little bit about the Historical Society. We were established by the territorial legislature, which means that we're actually 10 years older than the state of Minnesota. We are solidified in the state constitution, and we are a quasi-nonprofit state institution, which means that we are partially funded by the state, and we're also funded by income and by our membership as well. We're one of the larger historical institutions in the country. We had over 1,100,000 guests visit last year. We had 24,000 members, and we have roughly 2.6 million people visit our website 4.7 million times. And so even though we're a small state of about 5.5 million in Minnesota, we worked earnestly to make the most of the thousands of years of nationhood for the Dakota and Ojibwe nations and 161 years of statehood. So to that end, we have a lot of history, and Minnesota Historical Society strives to preserve it all through our collections. We have over 78,000 rolls of microfilm. What that means is every newspaper that was ever produced in Minnesota is required by law to give us a copy of their newspaper, and then we turn that into microfilm. We have 250,000 physical objects, 500,000 books, 53 terabytes of born digital items. So that's everything from digital photos to GIS information. And we have 26 historical sites. And it's these historical sites that we'll be talking about today. So, like most institutions, we use the web to market our websites and also to give out printed information about them. And when the Historical Society started, most of the web pages were built using HTML and Cold Fusion. About 9 years ago, we started using Drupal, a content management system. That's an open source content management system, to start consolidating some of our web pages into a more sustainable platform. And when I joined the Historical Society, the websites for each of the historic locations was built using a custom design template in what was then Drupal 6. The templates offered flexibility for multiple pages and a consistent interface for displaying pertinent information such as address and location, and also upcoming events. And it also had this really nifty weather bug on there. It was truly high tech. But unfortunately, the websites were not able to visualize the uniqueness of each of our locations. So example here, this is the website for Mill City Museum. This is our second largest museum. There's over 12,000 square feet of exhibit space. There's a theater, a courtyard, a working grain elevator. All this is housed in downtown Minneapolis in the ruins of what would later become the flagship mill for General Mills. And it looks like this. And this is the website for Marine Mill, which is an empty field and used to house a sawmill. So like any parent, we don't necessarily want to favor one site over the other, but sometimes you want to shop in the Husky section, and sometimes you want to shop in the petite section. Just want to make sure that your sizes fit. So at the same time that our historic location websites were experiencing growing pains, we also began the larger task of trying to update and tackle our security issues that were facing some of our older servers. And as would be all of our websites, our historical websites were located on these older servers. So as our local Minnesota hip hop group Atmosphere says, when life hands you lemons, you paint them gold. And in the spirit of seizing this golden opportunity, we decided it was not enough just to move our content to a new server. As stewards of state history and content, we need to be mindful of how we preserve this content and how we would serve it to our constituents. So besides the need to display content in a flexible manner and the urgency to address impending security issues, one of the more high-level issues we need to think about and talk about was accessibility. So we're a public institution, so we're just designers and just decent human beings. It means that we want to produce content that is available to the widest group of individuals. And, and it also means that we want to make it as accessible to the widest group of individuals. So I figure a lot of you folks actually probably work with accessibility, and a lot of you actually probably know more about it than I do. For this brief conversation, we'll talk about some of the larger issues that we had to tackle. So one of the more interesting data points that, looking at analytics that we noticed, was that 50% of our users were starting to use mobile devices to look at our websites. So what that means is that not everyone's using a desktop. A lot of people actually get their internet not through broadband, but they'll get it through their cell phone service. And so 50% of our users were seeing this. So this is literally not accessible to half of our constituents. And they're not able to access our websites in a meaningful manner. So we decided to double down and really commit to accessibility, and we worked with the consultancy. Many of the individuals there had the various access issues that our constituents would also display. So this ranged from mobility to sight impairment. And this helped us to start a process with an increased awareness of accessibility and to really think about some of the more high-level issues we could deal with. So some of them are alt tags, which is kind of a low-hanging fruit. We want to make sure they have alt tags for images so that screen readers can see them. Screen contrast, this would be for individuals who have sight impairment, so make sure that the language is legible. And importance of proper semantics over presentation. So that just means that when you have headers, you want to have your header 1 at the top. You want to use your H2 and combine that with its own content. And what you don't want to do is use your headers as a presentation tool. So a lot of people, at least on our site, were using headers because they wanted to bold their information, and it was messing up our content. We also want to have video transcripts and transcript pages and access to YouTube as well, because the YouTube embed would produce an iframe, which is not accessible to screen readers. And of course, text overlay instead of graphics. You don't want to use graphics for words, you want a text overlay, so then you can use screen readers as well. So during our discovery process, we worked with a diverse group of stakeholders to determine our approach for the new historic site web pages. Our first step was wireframing. So we decided, perhaps maybe a little bit unorthodoxly, to use PDFs for our wireframes. So there are a multitude of wireframing tools, and we actually settled on this because we thought PDFs would be comfortable for our stakeholders and also be comfortable for us because it would allow us to use some of the design tools that we were used to, and then we could move portions of content around. We also want to be mindful of ensuring that our wireframes were black and white or gray, that they didn't have a lot of extraneous colors or whatnot on them, so then we could really focus just on the content and not on whether it was the right photo that was put in the wrong place. So our meeting with our stakeholders produced a couple of requests from them. They wanted their basic information up front, so pertinent information like hours and direction and pricing, we want that to be prominent. Marketing wanted to be able to plug their events and promotions when necessary. And they also wanted that information to be able to coexist with interpretive content. And we also needed to display prominently alerts. So if there was a weather alert or if there's a promotional alert, we wanted that to be able to be shown prominently and then taken down by site managers if needed. And it needed to be sustainable, which meant that not just the web department could do it, but other people could do it as well. So we didn't see a reason to reinvent the wheel for our framework for this, so we actually did use Bootstrap to do our web framework. And we liked it because it's a responsive framework, and also there's a nice suite of design tools and design elements that come packaged in with it. And we also used something called paragraph bundles, which is a module available through Drupal. And we don't get like too technical about it. Basically what a paragraph bundle would be is just a tool for chunking together content. So this allowed us to say, okay, we have an image bundle, you put images in it. You have a text bundle, you put text in it. We have a layout bundle, which is just like a layout tool you might use in a layout program. And then you can put your content inside of it. And this really allowed us to chunk and move around our content. So during this process, we also started gathering content. So this meant meeting with the various site managers, going to the individual sites themselves, and also sending out a survey to the site managers because they, of all people, have the most information about what their constituents need and what the experience on a website would be like. This is myself and the other senior designer. We are at the state capitol, looking at a painting, I believe, of Arnie Carlson, who's one of our governors. And it's Tuesday, so I guess it's plaid shirt day. Just wearing that. Maybe that's the uniform in Minnesota. So after the discovery, we started building our first site. And we did this in a dev environment. And we did this because we wanted to make sure that users wouldn't accidentally stumble upon our development site on the live site. So we built everything, had it vetted, had it edited, and then we copied it and built it again in our live site. So that was our first site. And this is when we get to more of a lessons learned aspect because I would not want to repeat that process again. Even the idea of rebuilding something that had been built once took a little too much time. So it did take us 3 months to build this first site. And so this does not include the initial discovery process. And 3 months really isn't a long time for building a website. If you were going to go to a designer and say, can you build a website for my dog walking or dog washing business? It's a very big and large dog walking and washing business. 3 months would be reasonable. But you take 3 months and you multiply that times 25, and then all of a sudden you get 75 months. And 75 months is an extremely long time. And it reminds me of the story when I was walking down the street in Minneapolis. I ran into the civil engineer, and he was cleaning and painting a street light. And I asked him, well, how long does it take you to do this? And he told me there's 3,000 street lights in Minneapolis. So by the time I finished doing the last one, I come back again and start the first one. It would take us 6 years at this rate to do all of our sites. And at the end of 6 years, we would just finish, rinse, wash, repeat. That's a Sisyphusian journey, and it's not one that I would want anyone to do. So to that end, we had to find ways to move a little bit faster. So we started working with established page types. We knew that we were going to do some pages over and over again, so we started setting up templates for those. We expanded the functionality of our paragraphs as well. So we took our 2-column paragraph, and then made it into a flex column, which meant that we could then change the amount of percentages and the sizes of content that we put in there. So we had a 50-50, a 66-33, and a 25-75. We changed our 3-column bundle. So a 3-column bundle is what it sounds like. Basically allowed us to put 3 chunks of content in 1 column. We changed that into a gallery. So this meant that we could have overflow now. So instead of using 2 3-column bundles, we could just put as much content as we want and then move around whatever content was inside of it if we need be. And we developed something called a MOBO, or a modular box. This one's a little interesting because the MOBO is a formalized container, so it's basically, it's more of a design element. And we did this because we were getting to a point where we were starting to over-engineer our paragraphs, which meant that we're trying to solve a problem for every edge case. So what if somebody wants to have a border around it? What if somebody wants to have a search field or a more field? And we found that instead of doing that, it might make more sense to just have this design element that we could plop in if necessary, and then keep our other content as clean as possible. So this would serve as both a content chunk and a layout chunk, which is to say that it fits inside of a layout. So this is a mobile right here, and but it holds content as well. So these were the tools that we ended up having in terms of our layout tools. We had our layout bundle. So this would be a full width bundle for hero images, those big fancy images that stretch a screen. Single column, which would be for text or whatnot, it would have margins on the side. Our 2-column flex would be looked at in a gallery. And then we had a text, image, and our modular box. If there was a situation where we did want to put some extra code in there, we would just put that in our text box. So we would use text boxes, for instance, if we wanted to embed video. We also decided to provide an easy way to drag and drop items. So this functionality was rather nice. So if a site manager decided that the museum store really needed to push their products a bit more over exhibits, which you shouldn't do, of course, because exhibits are more important, but perhaps you have to make the quota for sales, then we just had easy drag and drop here where you could move items around quite easily. And that's something that the site managers could do and would not have to have the web department do it for them. We also had control for whether a particular chunk of content would display. So we set up what's called display yes or no. And this became really helpful for situations where we would know that content would be coming down the road. Let's say there's seasonal hours that would change in winter or in spring. Instead of developing them live at the time, we would set them up as soon as we got those hours and then just turn them on whenever the season came. And then when the season ended, we could just turn them off. And it was also helpful, excuse me, for live design, where if we wanted to see how an item would look in one particular setup, like with 2 columns, we could turn that on. And then if we had something with 3 columns, we could turn that on as well. And whichever one appeared to look the best, we could use. Okay, so no process is perfect. And around the time of our 5th or so site, our department underwent a transformation, and we went from a waterfall project management to agile project management. Our project manager who'd been helping was still involved, but her capacity changed. And I should say that we were probably semi-agile because if any of you can tell me how you can be totally agile, I would love to hear about it. It is an imperfect art from what I understand, but we worked at it. And we also were part of a larger institution, and the Minnesota Historical Society is fabulous, but it is not agile. But one transformation was that we started having our sprints. So we would have a 2-week sprint now, which was nice because then our stakeholders would have the opportunity to talk to us after every 2-week sprint. They could review the content and they could tell us if there's any updates, and we could then add that to our next sprint. We also started using Trello, and Trello is it's a project management tool, but really we could think of it as just like Post-it notes. And we started assigning particular pages to those Post-it notes because we knew those pages would be used over and over again, and those systems would be used over and over again. So a particular page or section would then have its tasks assigned to it, and then we could then assign whoever wants to do it, be done 25 times, and that way we're not reinventing the process every time that we have to do a new site. So now that we're kind of moving with some speed here, we worked with a consultant who then stopped us in our tracks again because he was aghast. He was shocked to find out that we were putting our styles, so our CSS, we were adding them into the code, or rather into the content of our pages, which was sort of a rookie mistake, but we thought that since we had individual sites and pages, we could probably get away with it. So at this point, we stopped again, and we separated all of our styles and set up a style sheet for each of our sites. This allowed the content to be repurposed, and it also kept the code out of the way of the content, because if you're like a site manager or whatnot, like you don't care about trying to update how something looks. What you want to do is update that content. So now everything was in its place and portable. So after about 18 months, we finished all of our sites, and we got a pizza party. you know, and pizza's great. You eat pizza on a Tuesday at work, and it's, you know, you go home and tell your kids about it. And so the end result of this is that we had a formalized approach of producing our historic sites, allow for a process that was repeatable and modular, and allow for the sites themselves to be constructed efficiently while displaying the unique aspects of the sites. So now Marie Mill looks like this. We understood that there wasn't a lot of content itself to talk about with the sites, but there were still some nice visual aspects that we could display. We could talk about the hours, and we could talk about accessibility. In Mill City, they had the opportunity to talk about future upcoming events. We could talk about all the things you could do there, so you could see the movie there. You could also see the exhibits there. You could go and see the flour mill. We had space for putting a video that was produced by our wonderful friends in strategic communications, admission information. And so all together, you get an idea of the robust nature of that physical location in this virtual location. So since the launch of our sites, our content has been updated by site managers, a newly hired content editor in the marketing department, and various other members of the site management team. Our template has been used for one-off events, and it's been used for exhibits as well now. And just sort of on a personal note, it's also really sort of allowed the interpersonal relationships at our place to sort of improve, just because we've been working so closely for so long on a pretty intense project. And so it was kind of nice to sort of reconnect with my colleagues, become friends with them again. So we have some time, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you guys might have. Yes?
I have a question.
Sure.
So we did something similar with our historic sites for the state of North Carolina.
Okay.
And the issue we ran into is once we made all the subpages,
Uh-huh.
when we got down to SEO, a lot of them had friends and support groups. And so there was this competition in Google searching that would direct people to the other pages. Did you run into that with any of yours? Do they have?
We had a couple.
The backend code of Google with the migration was horrendous. Like, it did not migrate well for us. So we used Drupal.
Okay. Let's see, we have maybe 2 or 3 friends groups, which we did link to. We did a lot of work with like the OG module, so we did like OG, and then the fields for sort of the Google, give me 1 second, meta tags, yes. So,
yeah, so we ended up having to go back in and update a lot of the meta tags
Uh-huh.
and fix the metadata and stuff. But I just know that was one of the issues we ran into with Drupal was it wasn't intuitive for us, like how it worked when you did like Google rankings and things, like how it went into SEO. But
yeah, and actually that probably could have been like another section of this where we actually had to go back and we had to sort of like update like the meta tags and sort of make it a lot more robust. And it's
Yeah.
true, there's like probably, like 9 or so different fields that you can fill out there.
Yeah.
We did tie in a site summary and a page summary with what would be used for the Google summary, and so that was kind of nice. And then we made sure that when we're generating our content for the site, that the content editors would write a summary as well, so we could plug that in. And so there was like a package of content that wasn't necessarily available to the users that we also applied to each page.
Yeah, so that was my question, because we did similar to y'all where we had admins or page editors for each of the sites that they had access, but they didn't realize like when they would update stuff, they weren't filling in any of those things. So do you have a team that goes back and reviews those?
Yeah, so actually that was so we actually, one of the tasks that we did have in our Trello card, I wonder if you can see it here. It's not here, unfortunately. We actually made that be a task for each page as well.
Okay.
And so there'd be a checklist of all the various fields you had to fill out. and then there was a field, excuse me, a field for the summary information that had to be entered as well. So yeah, so we did that from an admin level. The original content would come from the site manager level, but the input did happen on the admin level. Was that kind of
Yeah, yeah, that was, for anyone looking into this, that was a huge pain point for us.
Yeah.
When we migrated over with that many sites and sub-venues and things like that, was getting people trained to utilize those additional back-end metadata stuff.
Yeah, there was some hand holding for that, for sure. And there was also just us doing it too. Yeah. Okay.
You mentioned working with consultants at various points.
Yes.
Was it just, you mentioned 2 points, if I recall specifically, was it just those 2 points, or was it through the entire process? And if it was at certain points, what made you decide to work with them, and how did you go about that?
Sure. The first one was when we worked with an accessibility consultant, and we were just at the beginning stages of really trying reproducing a lot, or building really a lot of pages, and accessibility hadn't really been pushed at the Historical Society from a web level before. We had recently hired someone to be an accessibility specialist there, so as an institution, we started to think about it a lot more. And so then that became like really an opportunity for us so it's just our team to go and start thinking about it as well. Our project manager had looked up this particular consultancy, and then he took a day off to go do it. So it was since we took it pretty important, pretty seriously, we thought that before we pushed into the whole process of trying to make things build our sites. So that was the first one, and that was super helpful. So it was really good to not just use the tools, but to see someone else use the tools and see them how they experience it. Because I myself, and I feel a lot of that it's not having the same experience. The second one was we had gotten probably like a year into the process, and there was just a lot of stuff going on outside the work department with our servers and our team, and it just really became obvious that we had to rethink our processes for how we were building our sites and how we were treating them, how they were structured. And I suppose this might be too much information, but we actually followed that with also was working with some team building as well. So there was someone who assessed how we were doing things, and there was someone who assessed us as well. We took those like charts, we found out that some people were intuitive and some people were extroverts and whatnot. So that all happened at the same time. But yeah, once again, it was more that it just became obvious that we had to be mindful of how we were producing our content and producing our sites, because we were producing so much of it, and the technical debt was starting to mount up. And so we could make sure that going forward, we were producing more technical debt. Because with 26 sites, all of a sudden, what we had is that we were down 26, and we didn't want to like make those pain points for us in the future. But yeah, but that wasn't ongoing though. It was it's like a 2-week process. Okay.
And 2 accessibility related questions.
I will play this.
Did you have any problems with Bootstrap and accessibility? Were there any pain points with implementing Bootstrap in terms of the built-in modules or extending it at all?
Let's see. You know, we did end up hand coding some stuff, if that makes sense. So, especially when we started like working with tables and whatnot, tables don't necessarily have to be people. You know, there wasn't quite enough. We went and sort of combined some of our code that we hooked up with code we got in Bootstrap. The paragraph bundles that we used for people, we would add extra comments and tags in there on top of Bootstrap. But outside of that, we didn't have a lot of field accessibility issues. But showed up next. What was your
My second question was about YouTube. You mentioned that the YouTube player, because it's an iframe, the content of the YouTube is not accessible. So how did you solve that?
Yeah, so when we, if you wanted a YouTube video on our site, So let's say, I'm trying to find. Pizza Arrangements. Here we go. So if we had a video here, this is actually this is one of our text bundles, and then we put the embed code in there. I mean, you can't see it, but what we have underneath here is a tag that says view transcript, and that would take you to a page that has the transcript written out, and some HTML, and then the video again. And then there's another link that says view on YouTube. And so then you can go to YouTube and watch it there, because it's not the embed.
So the video is accessible when you're viewing it on YouTube, but the embed by default is not.
Yeah, because it's an iframes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, so if you were there, you would go to the screen, you're in the screen room, kind of use the black hole, and it would say like, view transcript, and you put it there, and you can do the transcript, and then go back to the picture.
So let's say that you are in a state right next to Minnesota with 12 historic sites. And, all right, we'll call it, let's just make it rainford. Let's call it Wisconsin. And,
Oh yeah, that's a township. Yes. I'm familiar with it.
and the historic sites websites are in dire need of fixing, but the marketing departments decided a long time ago that they need to look exactly the same because brand is more important than differentiating the experience. How might one make a difference?
That's my next presentation, web versus marketing. You know, my colleague, speaking communications stuff, which is part of marketing as well, but I'm not going to trash talk marketing, but part of it is really having to explain that the historic location sites are many things. And I think that accessibility means not just making sure that you've got a site that's built for students. It means that you're making a site that's accessible to people who maybe cannot go to the physical site. So the website isn't just a means of generating income or putting people in seats. It is a means of preserving history, and you want that experience to be accessible to the entire state. And because of that, there needs to be some flexibility in the presentation for those sites. And you know, you can carry some brand elements, but we certainly try to keep consistency with the colors and with the logo. But I really think that you need to argue for the unique nature of each site and how they would suffer under sort of this vision of similarity. So between access and accessibility and the uniqueness of the sites, it's sort of like you just got to take the fight to marketing and hope that you can win. Marketing is a very strong big boss, so you know there might be some leveling up, but yeah, that's an ongoing conversation. Sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. Win a lot, but because you're the one who's able to actually build.
Do you have any examples of some of these things that you're delivering as web content from a particular site that's not relevant to other ones?
Should I say that one more time?
Okay, so we were saying, the argument for having separate sites is part of it is that you're delivering the content directly
I
on
see.
the website. So are there some really interesting things on particular sites that wouldn't be on the others?
Okay, that's a good question. Well, let's go back, break these two websites. See if I can pull first that. So thematically here, I guess we look at this and we can say, we know that we want to sort of keep to the branding colors and something like that, but we have like different pieces of content that we want to emphasize a bit more. So if we were to say, no, we always want to have this gallery of images and a main image, you might say, well, yeah, but sometimes we homeland to people before the state. And so some additional information will be there. So that's treated differently than, say, something like First App, where it's a different type of experience, and we've you can have a video, and you can just emphasize the more visceral, sonic, and visual experience of it. You just tie in a smaller narrative on the bottom, and that's really different from, say, like Prince. Oh, sorry, somebody get Prince up here. Where everyone knows Prince, so for that, what you mostly have to do is get the dates there. We do have some other sites where it was necessary for us to add a sort of a robust amount of content. Our Fort Snelling site needs like probably 4 different sections of information because we want to talk about the different conditions as well. For the Capitol, we had to set up an art gallery because that particular location didn't just have historic relevance as a state building, but also there's artwork all throughout it, so we can work with art gallery for that. That would be different than how we treat Grove City, which is big. So it's a small things, but we don't put those in there as well, so that the user who may not really get there still has a really strong experience.
Hey, hi. I was wondering, before you chose Drupal, did you have an evaluation of the platforms you're going to use to build the project out, and why did you settle on that one over any other ones?
Actually, I wasn't at the Historical Society that chose Drupal. I do know that it was kind of snuck in there, but well, just to say that we were building our web pages a certain way, and then one of our developers was like, "Hey, we should try this," and started doing it. I have had experience with Drupal, which is why I took the job and got the job, and so there's a philosophical tie in with the institution and something like Drupal being that it's open source, which means that it's not for profit. It's tied in with the open source community. It's huge. It's robust. It's got a huge community of people who are constantly working on it. It also relies on those people to update as well. So we have people within the department who can apply patches and whatnot. So there's a sort of a social philosophical belief in that particular type of platform. It's tried and true, so it's being used for a lot of for-profits as well. And since it has all sorts of different modules, it is modular. So it has a lot of pluses for it. But I do remember hearing about how when it first got slid in there, some people were trying to say everything worked out.
It's related to that, or not related, following. Would it have been your choice had you been involved in that process?
It would have been because one other option. Well, you could certainly. Well, we could have continued down the path of building ourselves with PHP, HTML, made our own sort of very original site. We could have used web or this, I'm sure. We also probably could have picked up any number of black box, but content management systems that we paid for. So I would say this would still be my choice. I particularly agree with their vision as well, and I've had good experience with it. The trick with it is that it can be frustrating, and it can be frustrating from a back-end perspective. It's not always super intuitive, so we've had to do work to try to make the back-end a little less intimidating, and I've heard that's about people in large, but that's just about our department, working with other departments, just try to make it a clear process. So I guess I could have chosen. Well, I will be here for, I don't think my interjet's taken up anytime soon. So I'll be around for the rest of the conference, and I would be really happy to talk to you guys about any questions you might have, or maybe we can talk to Minnesota about that place, Wisconsin. We'll talk about how it's trying.
Oh, it's trying.
I'd be happy to do that too.
so much again. This is great.